You all have questions about who's coming up next at quarterback. It's a Friday mailbag.
You are Locked On Nebraska, your daily Nebraska Cornhuskers podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Good morning, and thanks for making Locked On Nebraska your first listen every day. We are free and available wherever you get podcasts and on YouTube, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, the #1 sports podcast network. By the way, your team every day. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. You want to be right in the middle of the action this season, head to FanDuel.com. Place your NFL live bets all season long.
Welcome. I am Mitch Sherman from The Athletic. Connor Happer of 1620 The Zone is with me. It is Friday mailbag. December 26th, we hope that everyone survived the holidays, had a wonderful and joyous time, and we're now looking forward to the final week of 2025, heading toward New Year's Eve and New Year's Day. We will start before the weekend with our traditional mailbag. Connor, how are you, first of all?
I'm good. Hopefully everybody had a Merry Christmas, and we'll try and get back in the swing of things at least a little bit before the new year here.
I'm feeling under the weather. Maybe you can hear it in my voice, but
not really. Actually, you're masking it well.
All right, so I'm masking it with cold medicine and nasal rinse and everything that I did in the 27 minutes that I was awake this morning before we began taping this show. So nice. I tried. I hope things don't give out on me and go in a worse direction as the show goes on. But I think I'll be all right. So let's start north of the border with Scott in Windsor. He says, why are we all just assuming that TJ Lateef will be back in a Husker uniform next season? In this era of outrageous NIL dollars, unlimited free agency, and genuflective butt kissing, anything is possible.
Nice.
Also, that's first question.
Okay.
He said also, as a listener, asked whether Nebraska belonged in the Big Ten. Yes, this was last week. This got me thinking, how well would Nebraska have done in each of the FBS conferences this past season? Mitch and Connor, do you think the Huskers would have been champions of any of the 10 conferences or even played in their respective conference championship games? If so, name them.
All right, awesome. All right, so let's do the first question first. I don't know that there is like this widespread assumption that Lateef is going to be. It's just that he's the only guy that anybody can count on right now because he's literally the only guy that's scheduled to be back that's in the room. So I think everyone has a pretty clear understanding of like, there's a world where he's not here either next year. But the lack of clarity on the rest of the situation, it affects that. So. Yeah, I don't know where you land on that.
Very, very few quarterbacks avoid the transfer portal. And I don't mean that they transfer every year, although some do that. But through the course of their career, very few stay at one school the entire time. So I just think with any quarterback, you have to expect that it's close to just a foregone conclusion that they are going to, if not transfer, highly consider the possibility. Do I think it will happen with Lateef here after year one at Nebraska? No, I don't. I expect and believe that he'll be back. But in no way would it shock me if something happens there. If somebody comes at him with a big number and he is unable to get Nebraska to match that or beat that, or maybe he sees it as a better situation. I don't know. Nebraska has to be ready for every possibility here in a 2-week period in January to sign 2, even 3 quarterbacks out of the portal. So they're going through all of that in the personnel department. And when we get to January 17th or 18th and the musical chairs have completely stopped spinning, we'll see where Nebraska's at. I think that it will have TJ Lateef in the fold, but I'm not putting big money on that. I did look into your second question, Scott. I think Nebraska would have won the MAC, Conference USA, the Mountain West, and the 2-team, would be a 3-team Pac-12 then if Nebraska was in it.
Yeah, with Oregon State and Washington State. I
Maybe played for the championship in another one of those G5 leagues.
What could I convince you? Now, I don't know if I even believe this. I just came up with it in my head. Could I convince you that Nebraska would have won 10 games if they would have played in the ACC this year?
Was Miami on the schedule?
Let's say no. Let's say they just played
Syracuse,
Virginia's schedule or something like
Wake
that.
Forest,
right?
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Maybe.
a possibility. I mean, what we saw from Nebraska at the end of the year is what's fresh in our minds right now. And that's a team that was just kind of bludgeoned mentally and physically by the Big Ten. You think about the team that rolled through the first 3 weeks of the year, although that's a bit of a overstatement considering the way the Cincinnati game. You think about the team that played Akron and Houston Christian, and man, that team would have been fantastic in the ACC. I don't know. I think Nebraska would have been a contender in the ACC. Let's say.
Yeah. I don't even know that I believe that, but they probably would have been in the mix in some other conferences. But you need playmakers to get the job done, and I don't know. So it's hard to tell. I'm not trying to make out all of Nebraska's problems to be just because they're in the Big Ten. That's certainly not the case. Here is Greg in Madison, Wisconsin. Amidst all the speculation around a portal quarterback, no one's talking about Zane Flores. He announced his intention to enter the portal immediately after Dylan did, and he's a Nebraska guy. I know his stats were very impressive at Oklahoma State, but are we just completely uninterested in him, or is he uninterested in us? Are we 100% committed to a dual threat quarterback at this point, and that's why he doesn't fit the mold?
We talked about Zane when he went in the portal. I think we spent a couple of minutes on it and maybe talked about it in a second podcast, but I think that he's a guy who, because of the way things went at Okie State, will transfer down. And that's kind of the quarterbacks. They generally either transfer up or transfer down. When you find, the ultimate example of transferring up was Cam Ward, and he did it twice and became the number one pick. And some guys are just on that trajectory. And I think if Zane is ever going to get to like a Big Ten or SEC level, that he probably has to have a stopover at the G5 level first, or maybe even FCS. And Oklahoma State put bad pieces around him. It's not entirely his fault. It's not his fault, really. I like very limited amount of Oklahoma State's woes are on the shoulders of Zane Flores, but I don't see him going from Oklahoma State to the Big Ten. Now, could he end up at Nebraska as like that second piece? It might be a great fit for that. So I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth here. But if Nebraska signs a high-profile quarterback to come in and be the starter, or be nose and nose with TJ Lateef in a competition in the spring, and then you just need somebody for depth, and that's something that Flores wants to do because it gets him close to home, then I think Nebraska would be interested. He's not dual threat, but Nebraska doesn't necessarily want dual threat. It wants mobile. It wants somebody who can move the pocket and move around and avoid sacks, extend plays, and he can be that kind of a quarterback.
Yeah, I would never say never. I mean, to the point that you just explained, where there's a lot of different situations for a lot of different people, and if it ends up at the end of it where it's like, oh, I'm not trying to make him seem like a super duper backup option here, but there's a lot of this is timing, and if spots are taken up, or if they go at other places, or whatever it might be, or if Nebraska has that type of situation, then I mean, you really never know who you're going to end up with. Here is Nathan in Kansas. He says, "Happy holidays and appreciate the great what? Oh, wait, were you saying?
I'm saying thumbs up to Nathan. Oh, okay. Yeah, he's the map maker.
I thought you were giving me the hold on. No. Happy holidays and appreciate the good work you put into the pod. Here are the updated maps and the DEFCON graphic. Oh my gosh, I forgot about the DEFCON graphics. There's the map. Go ahead. And
domestic map looking very full. I like the way that looks. Here's the international map. All right, we're doing well.
Wow. And then the DEFCON graphic. Do you have this?
Yeah.
Oh,
so
boy,
Nathan took it upon himself, very much an executive decision, to move us to DEFCON 3 because of the quarterback issues. We haven't updated our DEFCON readings since certainly not since Marcos Davila went in the portal. I think we haven't even done it since Dylan Raiola went in the portal. So,
which, by the way, I don't think the Marcos Davila is enough for me to move the DEF CON thing at all. So
it's not. It's just a depth thing. It's optics. It's the reality, the fact that you can say they just have one scholarship quarterback. I think Nathan's got it at the right spot here. He put the graphic at DEF CON 3. So good work. Good work to Nathan.
Yeah, maybe. I might go back to 4. Know.
All right. Whoa.
The fortunate part for Nebraska is they don't play a game that means anything for like 9 months. So you actually don't have to have that many quarterbacks right now, which is nice. Yeah. All right. Nathan's question. Until Nebraska has more than one scholarship quarterback for the 2026 season, I feel like we have to bump this up to at least 3. And if Vincent Shavers goes into the portal, I'm moving it to a 2. I don't have a mailbag specific question for this week, but curious your thoughts on a map related question. Should we continue on with the map into 2026, or should we wipe it clean and have a year specific map? So this is us floating this idea to the viewers right now. Go ahead and give us your thoughts on that. I'm not sure. I don't have a response to that really.
I do. I want to keep the map as it is. I don't want to clear the map. I like the map. I like the map full of pins, and I would hate to see it be empty. Yeah. Keep it rolling. Let's roll the map over into 2026. We rolled it into 2025, and let's roll it into 2026. Thank you, Nathan, for all your hard work in the 2025 calendar year.
Excellent.
Let's do one more question.
Yeah.
And then we'll take a break from Brian in Miami Beach. You're my daily lunch listen. Here's my question. It sounds like stocking up on O linemen through the portal is easier said than done. Let's say Nebraska picks up 1 or 2 starters for the offensive line and all of the guys come back with Jeep in as coach. How drastically different does our O-line look next season? And how does it affect the QB discussion?
Well, I think it was going to look different no matter what, right? You're losing Spindler and a couple of those tackles that had been playing for you this year. So, and Lutovsky. And so like it was going to look different. I think it's too early for me to say without like doing a whole lot of without having the knowledge of exactly what kind of offensive lineman Jeep Wade wants. It would be premature for me to say like anything about what specifically those guys are going to look like, compared to what it might have looked like under the coach that was here before in Raiola. So they will pick, as of right now, they're just going to get more offensive linemen. I couldn't tell you the difference between them and what they would have looked like if Donovan Raiola was still the coach.
It's going to look different because it's going to be a lot of different faces, and much like the Latif conversation, I don't think you should assume that any of the players who were penciled in as starters on the O-line coming back just because they have remaining eligibility will actually be back. There could be departures on the offensive line. It was an up and down position this year and they have a change at the position coaches. So there may be some players after the bowl game that decide to look around. We will find out, and we'll start to get an idea in the month of January what the offensive line in 2026 looks like. Right now, I could barely venture a guess, but I think it'll be different with Wade. I think he'll have a different style of coaching. Yes.
Okay. All right. Let's take a break. More questions from you all on the other side here on the Locked On Nebraska podcast. First word from the FanDuel Sportsbook, NFL Sundays, and nowadays, by the way, they're like NFL Saturdays and kind of NFL every days. One big play, suddenly everything feels a little bit different, and that's what makes betting with FanDuel, live betting with FanDuel, so exciting. You can place bets as the action unfolds. So whether it be no NFL games today here on this Friday, but we have Saturday, we have Sunday. If this pod is hitting you at that point in time, full days where you can dive in whenever and wherever you might like. So maybe you just realize that 2 teams are playing on a Sunday. You turn it on your television and then bang, you'd like to get invested in on the action. You could do that. The player props will update, the live spreads, the next touchdown scores, everything in between on FanDuel. It's all there for you. So we're encouraging you to get in the middle of the action. That's where you belong. Get right in the middle of it with FanDuel. FanDuel.com. Place your NFL live bets all season long with FanDuel. The game moves fast, and so can you. All right, welcome back. More of this Friday mailbag show. Like we said before, hope you had a Merry Christmas. Here's Brendan Do you guys think that Rhule was more comfortable hiring a defensive coordinator with no power conference experience because he had Phil Snow there to act as a resource/mentor to the new DC? Could this be a part of the plan for Coach Rhule to find a guy who could possibly help mold into a new version of Snow since he plans to retire? I'm excited to see what the dynamic looks like in the coming season, having Snow and Orich in the same room. I've always been told that youth and exuberance is no match for old age and treachery, but I'm excited to see what both could do working together. Do you think it's a good fit for both of them?
Snow 2.0. I think this was a question that is somewhat recycled from a year ago, and we talked last year at this time about whether John Butler might have been the pick for Matt Rhule because they felt like they could mold him to what they wanted as a DC. And I think that was more relevant. That was more realistic to think about last year at this time than it is with Orich, who's been a DC longer and has turned things around in ways with different programs than what John Butler had done, despite his older age and more experience at higher levels of football. So no, I do not think that they've gone this direction because they want to turn Rob Orich into the next Phil Snow. I think they would like to see Orich benefit from Snow's expertise and experience, but it's, if anything, they're moving it in the other direction where it is very much Rob's defense to come in, much like they did with Tony White back in 2023. This is your defense. Yep. You run it. And Matt Rhule is going to try again, as he does on the offensive side and the defensive side, to let his coordinators run the show. And to me, that's the best path for this defense to be successful.
I'll repeat this for the millionth time. We always look at like coaches when they come in just based on their resumes. It makes sense, right? It's the only thing we can see. It's the only thing we know. Where have they been? What have they done? But when they go through these interviewing processes to hire people, there are traits that stand out about them or things that they have heard about them throughout the coaching, sort of pipelines and pathways that don't show up in a resume. And so there is a reason that Matt Rhule hired Rob Orich. And I think what we've discovered is that it's because of his energy and how he gets his defenses to play really, really hard and aggressive and on path and physical. I'm not just saying this because he looks like me, but I think that's the reason why. It's not just like, oh, well, he has no experience, so we're going to put him in there with like that doesn't matter. So I don't think the presence of Phil Snow mattered at all. 0% in this factor.
And he showed a great understanding of youth basketball as well. Rob did. Let's go to Patrick in Pilger, Nebraska. It's wonderful. On Tuesday's show, you mentioned the fans should always be prepared for big portal announcements. We've mentioned that on this show also. Who do we believe are the most critical players to retain? Patrick's top three are Isaiah Hunter, Andrew Marshall, Williams Winery. Interesting that they were all in from the portal a year ago. I would not disagree with anything that you just said there, Patrick. Maybe you could add to the list TJ Lateef, because you just don't want to be in a situation where you have zero quarterbacks, and he's a good player. Who else would you want to throw into that? I'd put Justin Evans in that category because he's the anchor of your offensive line coming back for next season. I think I'd maybe put Riley Van Poppel in that category because they believe there is a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow with him at some point, that he'll turn into a Ty Robinson type player before it's all said and done. Shavers, Barney would be on that list too as a punt returner and offensive weapon. So that's a start.
Yeah, I think those are all great options. That's like 7 of them. I'll add one that I hadn't heard. Elijah Pritchett. I think Nebraska, it would be advantageous for them to continue to have Elijah Pritchett.
You don't want to be looking for a left tackle in this portal period. Because that throws a wrench into all kinds of stuff, the budget and everything. So one guy Nebraska also should want to keep this offseason is
Archie Wilson.
Archie. Are you sure? I mean, it doesn't,
Sorry, the volume wasn't loud enough on that, but we can try that again. This guy right here, he's down
Archie
under.
Wilson.
Yes. There he is. All right. Let's go to Tony. Tony paid attention to Connor's Rocky III analogy from his radio show last week, and then we brought that up and discussed it more in depth. He said, instead of the Rocky 3 analogy, what if we bring this closer to home? What if Dylan Raiola is to Matt Rhule what Bryce McGowens was to Fred Hoiberg? He shows that top talent can come to Nebraska, but also at the same time reminds the coach of the type of player and system that the coach has used in the past to be successful. And then he threw in something about the brother aspect of the McGowens, which is not as connected here in this spot because Trey McGowens,
he was
played
first
at Nebraska. He was first, and Tony acknowledges that. But Trey didn't come on the back of Bryce. Like, Trey was a good player and arguably like gave more on the basketball court to Nebraska than Bryce did. So like I wouldn't put him in like the Dayton Raiola never played at Nebraska category at all. But is Dylan Raiola going to be the Bryce McGowens of Nebraska football?
I don't mind that. I don't want to paint Bryce out in a bad light necessarily. And I also don't know that Bryce McGowens necessarily, like, his presence paved the way so that top players could come to, like, that didn't happen. And I know what Rhule is saying about, I know what Rhule is saying about Raiola, like, hey, like he, all that stuff. I don't know that that's true. I don't know that that's true. So like, I don't know.
I think when I hear this and the wheels are turning, I think the best way to draw that comparison is to say that Raiola is the player. It's like that's the moment where when he left and Nebraska had not gotten higher than 7 wins in 2 seasons. That's where the light went on that with Fred. That's where the light went on to say, hey, it's got to be team. It can't be about making this one player and then things will fill in around that player. And at times, I think that's what they thought with Raiola. Like, let's go get the quarterback, and then everyone will gravitate to Nebraska, and the level of the program will rise. So when Bryce left, Nebraska got back to playing the kind of basketball, or got to playing the kind of basketball that Fred had probably envisioned from the beginning. But he took a bit of a detour, and we'll see if that turns out to be the case with Dylan.
Yeah. I just don't know if Dylan, like, I don't know if you see what I'm saying? Like, I'm not sure that he like attracted all these other players to come here and made it like a cool thing. I don't know.
Neither one of them really did that. I mean, Dylan did it, I think, more than Bryce.
Yeah. Maybe. Yeah. All right. Here is Arch. He says, Mitch, as a fan of Heinrich Haarberg, I can't help but feel for him having been asked to change his football career to partially accommodate the career of Dylan Raiola. How might he have developed over the last 2 years if he had stayed at quarterback? Could he have developed into a Sorsby-esque player? Interesting that more mobile quarterback is what we're after now. Heinrich was a force when he vacated the pocket. Also, Clubber Lang was Rocky before Rocky got cocky and helped get back to his roots, which ultimately led to him beating Drago.
More Rocky 3 analogies. By the way, Christmas Eve, you know what was on? Rocky 3 was on. And
I assume Rocky 4, right?
Well, I think there was a Rocky marathon on one of the channels, and I was flipping through the channels in the semi-comatose state at some point, too much food on Christmas Eve, and settled in to watch Rocky 3. And the third round of of Rocky Clubber Part 2, man, it's one of the greatest rounds of the Rocky. I don't think it's as good as the 15th round or the 12th round, whatever, against Drago, but the last round against Clubber, when Rocky's getting mad and Clubber starts getting mad, it's some high level boxing movie production there. So
nice.
Very, very unrealistic, which the more unrealistic, the better when it comes to the Rocky movies. But
no doubt.
You could answer this question too. I don't know why it was directed to me. Do you think that Heinrich Haarberg missed his opportunity because Dylan took over the QB spot?
I don't know, but I mean, that part I think is probably undeniable, like that his career trajectory changed, right? But I think Arch is sort of asking, like, how would it have worked out for him? I think they would have just gone in a different direction, right? Like that, I think he was their idea for him was for him to not play quarterback. You know, and they're not looking for a Heinrich Haarberg, by the way. They are looking for a dual threat, but Haarberg did not do the throwing part particularly.
Yeah, he's just more limited. He's a great athlete and plenty good enough as an athlete. He's a dual threat. There's the difference between, I think there's a stigma among some quarterbacks about dual threat, and the reason that there is because it's believed in today's world that dual threat means that your ability to run hinders your ability to pass. And Heinrich, that's the case. In a quarterback who is just evasive and mobile and can get out of the pocket, like what Latif wants himself to be, how he sees himself, is as equally adept at both things, and maybe even better as a passer. So I mean, Heinrich was not destined for the NFL as a quarterback, and he might make it as a tight end, just because there's a team out there who's probably going to say, look at this guy's potential and what we can make him when he's in an NFL facility all the time. So Nebraska might have won more games over the last 2 years with Haarberg at quarterback than what it did with Raiola, but I don't think that it like was to the detriment of Heinrich and his future.
All right, let's take a break. We have a couple more quarterback questions. We actually got to go speed round here on these last few when we come back.
Before we do that, let's talk about Game Time, because there's nothing like this part of the college football season when it's the bowl time. The playoffs are upon us. You got tailgates. There are packed stadiums still, and being right there in the middle of it all, well, nothing beats that. The energy, the bands, the moments that you remember forever. But if you want to go to those games and get tickets, that can be frustrating. No more with Game Time. The long queues, the logins, prices, the jump at checkout, that's all in the past. Game Time is giving the advantage back to the fans. It's the easiest way to unlock amazing tickets to college football bowl environments and the experiences in just a few taps. The app is easy to use. You can go from browsing to buying in just minutes. They have zone deals where you pick the section, Game Time picks the seats, and then you save bucks. Knowing the prices up front, that's great. It's stress-free. Take the guesswork out of buying college football playoff tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. All right, we're back. Speed round as we come to a close in this the final full week of 2025. By the time we talk to you at the end of next week, it will be 2026. Nebraska will have played in the Las Vegas Bowl. We will have our reaction to all of that and everything else that is happening as the transfer portal opens. Transfer portal opens 1 week from tomorrow. 1 week from it happens on a Saturday. Is that right? January 2nd is a Saturday. So there you go. You can expect a newsy weekend next weekend. Let's go to Kellen. Kellen says, I can't help but wonder, do you think the offense's inability to protect Raiola for most of the season was a major reason why he decided to enter the portal, even though his only sack of the night against USC that was his only sack? He ultimately broke his leg because the defenders got through to him. Was that the last straw?
Well, I think the injury had a factor. You know, if this season ends up what it was supposed to be and he doesn't get hurt, they win a couple more games down the stretch, then maybe he doesn't leave. I'm not sure. Hard to tell how much, hard to tell if it wouldn't have happened anyway, but I suppose that you could make the argument that, yeah, that made it certain, or that made it pretty obvious, I guess, at that point.
Yeah, it was a factor in the frustration building for sure around Dylan, that it was hard for him to stay upright in the pocket. Let's go to Jim in Winchester, Virginia. Are there multi-year contracts for portal transfer student athletes, buyout clauses, if broken, incentives like coaches? It seems that many, particularly QBs, change schools every year. I'm thinking that there should be some kind of a fee for service. You know what we're saying. Do they have contracts? Would that provide stability on the roster? Sorry for stumbling all over your question, Jim. And I think the answer is it's evolving. Like, this is the first year of rev share contracts for players, like contracts with the school. And some of that stuff is there's no rule against it. Some of it is starting to emerge. And I think as we go further into this, we'll see more and more contracts. We may not see them, but the athletes and their agents will see contracts that do involve more complex language, like multi-years and multiple years.
I think you're seeing that a little bit. Okay, I think there's some 2-year deals out there. The problem with giving that out is that you're going to have to throw ahead some guaranteed money to 19-year-olds who you haven't played much football before, and they have to be all the things and stuff like that. So it's a balance, just like it is for everybody else. But yeah, it exists. There's guarantees in there, and some of the money goes away if you don't live up to the standard and all that different stuff. But you're right, there it's evolving too.
All right, let's go to John in Lincoln. He said, I've heard a lot of talk about why Nebraska had to sign such a small class for this year. Our existing roster is big. We have to save money for the portal. However, I see other big-time programs signing full-size classes and would like to think they have the same constraints as us. Are the explanations for why the class is small actually just excuses, or am I missing something?
Yeah, I think Nebraska is just trying to bring most of its roster back and continue developing it. But I think you don't have to be like other programs, because other programs aren't like your situation. I mean, Nebraska is trying to take its young roster, bring it back, and build on it. Right? That's what they're attempting to do in a really, really big picture sense. There could be school B who's out there who lost 37 guys in their senior class this year and lost another, dozen to the portal or something like that. Nebraska's not in that spot. Their roster is young. That's why they didn't bring in a big class. Yeah,
there are not a lot of programs out there that had 91 freshmen and sophomores on the team. And if there are, I don't know that they're in the same position as Nebraska, where the urgency to get older because of what they see on the field is as prominent. So there are real reasons that Nebraska put out there for why the class was small. And, next year in 2027, the class presumably will be much larger and expect it to be a big class of transfer entries. If you get to the end of January and Nebraska still is looking unusually small with its group of newcomers, portal and recruits, then I think it's worth investigating the reasons on a deeper level.
Here's Brett in Omaha. Merry Christmas. I saw Frosty the coach man is suing Nebraska, but I couldn't understand the exact details of it. Who's in the wrong? Scott of the university. Even if Scott is right to sue, the optics look bad considering how little Nebraska got back on its investment.
Yeah, he says, follow-up, does this tarnish Frosty's reputation with Nebraska fans for good, or was it already beyond saving? Maybe in 20 years we can invite him to a spring game and on the first play call an onside kick in his honor.
Yeah, I think the reputation's in a tough spot with Nebraska fans. This probably seals the deal on that.
What would have to be the path and the what would have to happen in Nebraska football in order for 20 years from now to welcome back 70-year-old Scott Frost waving into Memorial Stadium? A couple national championships, I think, would make people forget about.
I don't know, man. It's like it's yeah. I guess you would forget about it, but I would think that the thing that would have to happen would be Scott Frost to take any sort of responsibility for the atrocities that occurred over his time here. Which
for him to do like a sit down with like, I don't know who's today's version of Barbara Walters or Oprah Winfrey, where he's just like laying it all out there about how he messed things up. The lawsuit, I would expect that's going to get settled somewhere, and it's interesting that it came to that point where he actually had to file a lawsuit. I don't know enough about the legalities of it to say that one party is in the wrong or the right. It's probably worth noting that had Trev Alberts waited 10 days to fire Scott Frost, they could have owed him many millions less. I don't think that Nebraska has been like the opposite of generous in its willingness to pay him, but you have to go with what the contract says. And I know some of this had to do with like the timing of when he received his his buyout money and how that affected his tax liability. So you're going to have to talk to like a tax law person to know who's in the right or in the wrong. But I don't think we're ever going to see Scott standing in a courtroom opposite of like the University of Nebraska council. They'll get this thing figured out and have a settlement, sometime.
What an image you would be, though. Clayton in Lincoln says some nice things about the show. Thank you, Clayton. Appreciate it. Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. Then he's got two questions. Number one, how real is this Nebraska ball team, and how do you expect them to fare once they get deeper into Big Ten play?
Yep, that's question one. They're real enough to be a team that doesn't have to worry about being on the bubble at the end of the regular season, and that's greatly aided by the fact that they are going to have finished non-conference play after the game against New Hampshire next week, undefeated, and have a 2-0 start in the Big Ten with wins against Wisconsin and on the road against Illinois. Like it's literally a perfect start, a perfect 2025 for Nebraska basketball. So yeah, they're real. Are they Duke? No, but they're real. They can win a game in the tournament this year for sure.
Oh yeah. I think your target is like, I don't know, 12-8, 13-7 or something like that in the Big Ten. And then you worrying about, you go to the Big Ten tournament with 23, 24 wins underneath your belt. Yeah. That's a good spot to be in.
And then he says, as a lifelong Nebraska fan and UNL alum, Jayskers have always made me sick. To be clear, we can make an exception for Connor because of his work with the Jays. Thank you, Clayton, on this one. He says, I know it's probably unavoidable if you grow up in or live around Omaha, but what's your take on Jayskers? Are people like me being dramatic, or is there some justification for I guess cheering for both universities, since Creighton is literally a rival? Thanks for everything you guys do.
Yeah. Most of the people that I do hear from on this that are really mad about it are not from Omaha, and they're like, what? I don't understand it. I root for everything Nebraska all the time. And yeah, I don't know. There are options for teams to root for, that you can take, right? So I guess that would, I don't really know how to simplify it any more than I ever have, on this subject. It doesn't make sense to everybody else, but it makes sense to like who's not in Omaha or doesn't root for Creighton or whatever it is. But it makes sense to literally all of those people. I mean, and we're all like, what's going on? I don't know what you guys are so mad about. So that's where I'm at.
If it's not Auburn, Alabama, it's not Michigan, Ohio State. Like they're not in the same conference. So I'm with you. And like, I just don't see I think it's Nebraska fans. And then it can be fans on both sides who are being dramatic. If you have that level, the level of hate that we see from some, but whatever, like we all live amongst each other. And I think it'd be more strange to root for Iowa in one sport and Nebraska in the other. Because
I don't understand how you could hate so you hate Creighton fans, yes, but you hate Jayskers more. You hate the people who are Nebraska football fans more. That doesn't make any sense to me. So I don't know. You guys got to square that one away. I'm not sure.
And then the last one, we'll finish with this, going a little bit long today, but that's all right. It's still a holiday weekend. From Tim in Greenville, South Carolina. He's looking for a pin. So if we don't have one there, Nathan, you can add that. So there's been a bit of debate on some of the NU message boards about whether local sports writers can ever break a story that might be perceived as negative to the program, i.e. the Scott Frost implosion, the Raiola family drama, or the John Butler firing. The argument goes that reporters can't report on speculation versus reporters after the fact saying they knew about something but couldn't report it, versus the publishers won't let these reporters do negative pieces for fear of the publication losing all access to the program by vindictive coaches or administrators. So my question is, what's your take on this, especially in towns like State College, Lincoln, or Tuscaloosa? Do reporters have to be cheerleaders? Can they ever break the negative story?
Oh wow. Yes, of course. And most coaches and administrators and people with inside universities, while they might be mad at the moment, are adult enough to be like, yep, they're just doing their job, and that's kind of how it goes. I don't think anybody's like worried about, access, get it. Like everybody always says that, it's like, oh, they're just worried they're going to get their credentials taken. It's like, no, you go with what you have, and what you have from a a solid point of view. I don't know. There's like 700 different arms to this question.
I know there is a very recent example of a situation where limiting access or removing access was threatened or may have actually happened, but I can count on like one finger or two fingers of one hand the number of times I've actually seen that followed through upon in 30 plus years in this business. So that's just not something that people really worry about unless you're just going into the reporting of something in a completely unfair and unjustified kind of way. But as long as you do your job and do it responsibly, it doesn't matter if you're local, national, regional, whatever, if you're attempting to break a story. I will say that there's been a lot of change among the media landscape just because of audience habits and what sells in this business, to the point that some in more locally than nationally are less likely to aggressively pursue negative stories because it may not be something that benefits their business as well. And that's not everybody in the media. I like to think that's certainly not like the company that I work for. There's been plenty of examples of The Athletic in recent days and months all over stories that are very negative. Look at Michigan, they've been broken and reported upon by people who are local, who live locally. But yeah, like you have to take each case by itself. And I understand why, some of these perceptions exist and why it becomes a topic, as you mentioned, Tim, on message boards. But no, there's not like some underlying conspiracy by local media or any media to sweep things under the rug when it comes to negative stories. A lot of it's just like having the evidence, like you bring up Scott Frost's departure from Nebraska and why there wasn't like a tell-all about everything that happened or supposedly happened with Frost that led to his firing. You need like hard evidence. You need people who say, yes, this happened, that happened. And a lot of that is, a lot of it's just things that are that were blowing out there in the wind. Like, hey, I heard this from this person, and okay, like you got hard evidence.
A lot of the things that happen, people want to know about the things that happen. But really what the things are, the stuff that the media doesn't report on, they provide the brush strokes that you need to paint a larger picture. Right. And that's often the thing that comes out. That's often the thing that you hear at the end of it. Like, oh, I'm starting to see the picture here a little bit. And if the detail, you don't need to know. I'm telling you, and I'm serious when I say this, you don't want to know every detail about your program. You don't. You just you wouldn't want to. So there's that piece of it too. That is tricky.
Yeah. In the finish it with this, but like in the instance of the Michigan Sharon Moore stuff, yes, there were reporters who said, hey, we knew that this was going on before Moore was ousted for his unacceptable activities around the office and apparently throughout his life. But hearing something and thinking something is different than being told on the record after the firing occurs. And I guess you can like apply that situation to others that are less salacious around the country and kind of get an idea of the way that the process works in every one of these spots.
Okay, mega Friday mailbag. Thanks for joining us today. We appreciate it. We'll be back with you on Monday. That's, of course, for those of you on video and on audio. Appreciate you joining us today, wherever you might be. Have a good weekend. We'll talk to you soon.